Hello, Mark Pearson, Executive and Artistic Director of the College Light Opera Company, coming to you from Highfield Theater. Welcome to our last episode of Backstage, a weekly broadcast featuring work being done by our talented design and production department. I hope you enjoy the show.
Kristen Knutson, Production Manager and Technical Director. For the past few weeks, our design and production company members have been working independently on long-term creative projects, highlighting their design sensibilities and crafting skills. This final creative showcase is the culmination of their summer's work, and I'm very proud to share their final projects with you today. First, we're going to take a look at part of their workshop discussion with scenic artist and stand-up comedian Emily Walsh.
So I am now a member of USA 829. I'm a scenic artist, and I paint TV and film. Just for context, in case I say anything about it, I broke my elbow at work in 4 places in January. What I will say, just general advice to anyone ever, any amount of injury that you experience at work, fill that paperwork out the day that it happens. Don't be one of those people who says, I'm fine, no big deal. That's just a side note about workers' comp. Just fill out the paperwork if you hurt yourself at work. So I work on a show called Ghost. I will hope to be returning to Ghost. It is at Steiner Studios in Brooklyn, which is one of the biggest stages in New York. There's kind of Steiner, and then there's a bunch of stages at Broadway Stages, which is in Greenpoint, which is in Brooklyn as well. They're just kind of a big group of buildings that have kind of come together. But Steiner is the only one in New York where you like drive in under a big gate and there's like security and nice new buildings, and you kind of feel like a clean person at work, which is not always the case when you're doing, entertainment. I got into A29 in 2000 and I believe 16. So it's been 4 or 5 years. I can't remember the exact date. But to be a scenic artist, you take one of 2 tests that are pretty lengthy and very skill-based. I recommend unions in any capacity to any person, especially in this time. Before that, I was the assistant scenic charge at the Juilliard School. If you're in the position, and if the world is in the position, when you graduate school, they do have a paid internship there in every discipline. And then before that, I did a lot of freelance theater, everything that you can think of, every nook and cranny off-Broadway theater that exists in this world. I have painted something for it. There's plenty of work to be had if you're a person who can, make the right phone calls and show up to places on time and be a responsible human being. But it is very patchwork. You do need to kind of steer your own course. But in the 5 or 6 years before I got into the union, I did do theater. I spent about a year when I was like 22 painting scenery at theme parks. So it's Six Flags Chicago, Six Flags Mexico City, and then a park in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I spent a month at each of those parks doing what's called a scare attraction, which is a very fancy haunted house. So that was like a walkthrough experience that I painted on for big chunks of time. And then after that, I spent about a year working theater on cruise ships. So we would do the scenery for the ships, and it was a very unique experience because a lot of the bigger cruise lines, say your Carnival, stuff like that, they typically have scenery that's constructed and costumes and everything that's constructed offsite, and then they maybe have a couple people come in to install it on the boat, and maybe they have a couple people they employ to run the shows, that kind of thing. But the company that I worked for, so the ships we were on circumnavigate the globe. They don't just do like Bahamas, Florida. They like do this crazy route. So if you're insanely wealthy, you can stay on all year and see the whole world. But the first cruise I did was a 10-day cruise, and to a civilian would have cost $31,000. So very, very, very high end. I was paid as a contractor, so I got to like stay in a room with a king size bed and orchids, and it was a wild time. But we would do the scenery. We'd work on the scenery at sea because they couldn't afford to dry dock. They only dry docked every 2 years. So I also worked on dry docks, which were a time like where I spent a month in a shipyard in Marseille, which is a whole other thing. Before that, and during some of that, I did 9 summers of summer stock theater, College Light being my second, and the last 3 were all at Williamstown Theater Festivals. Highly recommend that to anyone in any discipline, always. Again, when the world is open again, I think it's a incredibly great portal to New York City if that is the avenue you want to take. The slogan is literally where Broadway goes to summer. So that's kind of what that is. And that's in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. And the start of this adventure, I went to Boston University, where I met Mark Pearson. And I have a degree in scenic design. And at first I kind of thought I wanted to design, and I spent the first like 6 months to a year out of college designing some small shows and assisting on some shows. I don't want to be like flippant about it. I don't think I cared enough to make like $100 on a show that I was going to put, 300,000 hours of work on. And I just literally just couldn't afford to do that in New York. I think it's an important conversation to have, that it is a really difficult thing to do financially, to be a designer in New York, especially if you're 6 months out of college and your loans kick in. Found through work that my skill set is really in translating people's ideas and problem solving. And I think that that is a little different than design, and I just preferred it overall as a profession. Oh, and I forgot, a year in there. Since I've been in the union, I worked at the Metropolitan Opera for a year. So in between TV shows, I was there for a year. They do have the local one apprenticeship there, which is another union, and another path. I know I'm just like spewing things at you, but I'm hoping one or two of them turns into something you want to talk about. In my 5 years in the union, I spent 3 years working on a TV show called Blue Bloods, which your grandparents may enjoy, featuring Tom Selleck and Donnie Wahlberg. And then other notable things, my first job in the union was the last season of Boardwalk Empire. That's kind of where I'm at. And then you did mention I do stand-up. So I started doing stand-up about 3 years ago. And at this point, pre-COVID, pre-elbow shattering, I would say I was doing stand-up 4 to 5 nights a week and working a 50-hour week in TV. So my life was very, very hectic, but I did enjoy it. And I did take a lot of Fridays off and do some weekend traveling. I've performed stand-up in probably 15, 20 states by now, and was thoroughly enjoying that part of my life before it went away. But, we can do comedy on Zoom. It's terrible, but we do it.
some fun. How'd you like it? Let me show you a good time. Hey, big spender. Hey, big spender. The minute you walked in the joint, I could see you were a man of distinction, a real big spender. Good looking, so refined. Would you like to know what's going on in my mind? So let me get right to the point. I don't pop my coat for every guy I see. Hey, big spender. Hey, big spender. Hey, big spender. A little time with me.
Hi everyone, Melly here. Today I want to talk about my final project. So what I ended up doing is that I 3D modeled and 3D printed the genie's lamp from Aladdin. So here are some pictures that I used as inspiration from other productions of Aladdin. And then in the top left corner, this is what I drew. I consider this to be inspiration, not concept art, because through the modeling process, the design changed quite a bit. The software that I used to 3D model is called Tinkercad. Tinkercad is a beginner-oriented 3D modeling software. It is usually used to 3D print. This was my first time ever 3D modeling with the intentions of 3D printing, and it was my second time ever 3D modeling. I was really happy with the way it came out. For reference, the grid around the lamp is 12 inches by 12 inches. Unfortunately, the printer that I was able to use could only print to 75% of my actual model, so it did come out a bit smaller. That was probably for the best because I think this might have been a little bit too big. Tinkercad is a really interesting software to use for 3D modeling because it's shape-based. And what that means is that you just get an array of different 3D shapes to choose from, and then you work the different shapes together like a puzzle piece to make the shape that you're looking for. It was definitely tricky to get used to, but it was very fun once I figured out how it all worked, and I think I got a pretty detailed product. Now we're moving on to the STL file. The STL file is just how you convert the 3D model into language, basically, that the printer understands and can print from. So this is my STL file. I was very lucky that someone was willing to print my product for me for free. And so this is what it looked like all printed. It printed in purple, which was really cool and a little surprising. It also printed with some imperfections on the surface of the lamp. I tried to sand those off, which I got a lot of it off, but not as much as I hoped. So next time that I do 3D print, I think that I will spend more time on the sanding process. So now we're on to painting. What I did to paint the model is that I painted it 3 times with white paint to prime it, and then I painted it twice with gold paint. The paint did not go on super easy, but I think it looked okay in the end. So unfortunately, I dropped the lamp as I was painting it, and the handle broke off and broke in half, but no worries, I just fixed it with some bulldog grip, and it was good as new. So here's some pictures of the lamp out in broad sunlight or in moonlight, as the case may be, just from different angles, so you could just see what it looked like.
There were 2 reasons why I wanted to do this project. The first being that I've always wanted to dip my toe into the world that is 3D printing, but was too intimidated before. This project acted as the perfect reason to take that leap and test it out. And I'm so glad that I did, because it really was a whole new world. And secondly, because of the significance of the piece. When I think of Aladdin, my mind instantly goes to the lamp. It's iconic and acts as, in a way, the trademark of the show. The lamp posed challenges because its importance is larger than itself. There's a lot of weight on this object to help push the plot along, yet due to the nature of what it is, the object is small, refined, royal, and in ways delicate. It's grand, spilling with intricacies and detail, and should demand attention, but not in a way that lights up and screams at you, "Notice me!" I kept this in mind with every choice I made. The smooth, fragile, curved handle, choosing royal gold paint with a metallic finish so it could catch the light better, are two examples. I wanted to capture the intrigue of the viewer with this piece, make them curious, like they couldn't take their eyes off of it. And of course, I hope to capture a sense of magic. Because really, what would this story be without magic?
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Moran, and for my final project with Clock, I wanted to create a set for one of my all-time favorite shows. I absolutely fell in love with this show when I saw it on Broadway, and that show is Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. I wanted to take this show and translate it to an educational stage. What I mean by that is I wanted to create the set as if it was going to be produced in my own theater at my school, and not just the main stage normal theater. I wanted to bring it to our black box theater. The reason I wanted to do this is because this show is a very immersive show that really requires the audience to feel very included in it, and I think that the black box would really bring that part of this show to life, and this is my design. Here's my inspiration board for the set. I wanted to take a lot of inspiration from the Broadway show, but I didn't want to copy it completely. I just wanted to adapt it to the level of a production that my college would actually be able to put on, but also keep the inspiration from the original production. In the original Broadway production, all of the walls were made of red curtains. There was no actual physical flat walls in the theater to make it seem more immersive and keep you guessing from where people are going to come from. But this isn't exactly possible for a college production, in my opinion, because curtains can be very expensive. So in different parts of my design, I decided to use red flats instead of curtains to give that same effect of one red room, but it's not as expensive. All of these red walls, curtains and walls, would have a bunch of golden frames on them to clutter the space. These frames would be found by going to thrift stores and buying them for cheap, but if we couldn't find enough from the stores, I would also mix the real frames with frames that would be made from sticks of wood with hot glue on them, put on in different designs to give it that sort of golden texture, and then it would be spray painted gold to look like the other old original frames. So this is just the beginning of my design process, and the two things that I was really thinking about during this whole design process were, one, how can I adapt this and make it possible in a smaller space like this black box theater, and two, I really kept the storyline in mind because there are places that just need a big entrance or need to be in a secluded spot. The next part of my process was actually getting a basis of the sketch down on a ground plan of the theater. It's just kind of getting out where the set pieces would be, where the audience would be, and what spaces would be labeled as what. You'll notice that in my ground plan I didn't include this little cutout that I put in my original inspiration drawing. This would be Pierre's office where he plays the piano for one of his big songs in the show, and it's also where he drinks and writes. He has a lot of stuff going on in his mind. And I wanted that to be a secluded space, but I felt that if it was in the center of the stage, it would take away from the choreography that's in the show. This is a very dance-heavy show, and it depends on its dancing sometimes to tell the story, so I didn't want to take away space from that. The first thing that I decided to draw was what you see when you walk into the space immediately as an audience member. What you see first is this big door. This is very much inspired from the Broadway production. This door represents the outside world of Russia during the war. It's as if when you walk through those doors, you're not in the war anymore, and you're in a place that allows you to escape. They also serve a great purpose for characters to enter and have a grand entrance. These doors would have lights behind it to give this sort of silhouette shape to people that need a big entrance, like the character Anatole. He's a very full of himself person and he needs a big entrance when he enters the room. One of my favorite parts of this space is that we have really big stained glass windows because this building used to be a church. I didn't want to just cover them with flats. I really wanted to include them in the design because when they have light behind them, they give such a nice soft glow, and I think that could replace the chandeliers that are missing from the original production design. I think they would be a really great replacement for that to give it a more mystical glow in the space. And on the other side of the theater, we have where the audience enters, where the stage manager, the lighting booth, and the sound booth are, and where I would place the pit. Because the band members and the stage manager and the light and sound crew all need light to do their jobs, I didn't want them to take away from the rest of the space, so I decided that they would also be covered by red curtains, but their red curtains would be more of a chiffon fabric so that they could see through to see the show and be able to run the show or play the music with the show. You'll also see in this space that I've placed Pierre's office on this kind of deck thing that we have in front of the stage manager's booth. I decided that this would be a nice space for him because it's a space that all of the audience could see from any part of the theater, and it just kind of gives him his own place to do his thing because he's kind of in his own head for most of the show, singing about his life and his problems and everything he's thinking. He's a very intellectual man, and I think he deserved to have his own space like this. The flooring would be made of a normal platform, painted to look like wood, but I didn't want it to just be wood. I wanted it to have these gold star details that kind of represent the chandelier that's in the center of the stage, just to give it that sort of polished, more fancy than just wood flooring look. And I think that about wraps up all the things that I wanted to talk about with this design. I really think and hope that this conveys some of the key phrases that I wanted to have this set represent, and those are that I wanted to create a very deep personal experience with the audience that involved a beautiful sort of chaos, and I wanted this environment to be indulging for the audience. I hope you all enjoyed watching me go through this process again. This has been a fantastic summer, and I can't thank Clock enough for this opportunity to keep designing while I've been out of school, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your summer as well.
For my final project, I chose to make a period ensemble from the late 1810s. Both patterns are from one of my favorite shops that make Resto Revival patterns, where they take historical patterns, add sizes, and redraft them for use. The majority of the sewing for both pieces was done on a machine, but for some places, hand sewing was required. This is how I made the 40 buttonholes for this project between the shirt and the trousers. I took my button sewing in the car on my drive up to my school and sewed the 6 front buttons and 2 buttons on each sleeve for the blouse. For the skirt buttons, I used these nice brass buttons, and there I sewed each on, and there were 20 total. For the underpinnings of this ensemble, I used some modern pieces, a tank top and a modern undervest corset. I did not tight lace the corset for a couple of reasons. The first being, it has been a while since I have tight laced, so my body is not accustomed to it. And the second reason is that the fit was already a bit large, and lacing tightly would have only made the pieces larger.
Hi, my name is Valerie Stebbins, and you are looking at my final creative project for the design part of Clock. What you're seeing right here is this table I found on the street, and I thought that I could spice it up a little bit, make it look a little better, and give it a new life. As you can see, it's pretty beat up. There was nail polish on it. It looked like it came from a home with kids. How I started this project was I started by sanding down the entire thing. Just so I can get a fresh coat of paint on it. I sanded for forever, is what it felt like. As you can see, my little sister is coming in and out, and she doesn't normally help all the time, but whenever she wants to give a hand, she does. As you can see, my boyfriend has now entered the picture. It's his last week in Massachusetts before he goes away, so we kind of did this project together. And it was a lot of fun to have him there to help me out and so we can keep ourselves entertained. But as you can see, we are still sanding. As we continue sanding, when I started this project, I wasn't really positive exactly how I wanted it to look at the end, but as I continued and I was looking for things at the store, I figured out that I wanted it to have this little like chic modern look. So for the bottom, I ended up painting the entire I wanted this like black, and I wanted it to feel like it could go in any home. You can change the handles out, maybe it goes in a different home, and yeah, that's kind of what I wanted from it. As you can see, we are still sanding, which is always a fun day. We're getting close to the end of sanding now, which is a good time. It probably took me about 4 hours to sand. My little sister comes in and she wants to try to use the sander, which is kind of funny because she doesn't really build things, but she's awesome. Shout out to Lacey. So as you can see at this point, we need to get all the sand and whatever is on it off. So this is what it looks like after it has been completely sanded, pretty much taking all the finish off. And now you can see we're prepping to paint, which is always a good time. When we were taking off the sand off of it, we kind of I did this dry rag and then I did a wet rag over it. Probably should have done a little more, but you know, you live your best life. Here you can see me putting some wood glue in. The drawer was a little unsteady, so yeah, and you can see that that my clamp didn't fit, so we kind of jury-rigged some clamps together. It worked out, I promise. I would recommend a longer clamp, but I didn't have one. So you can see me taping off some of the painted part, so where I was gonna put stain in the center, and now you can see we are starting the paint process, which is always a good time. It took also forever. Personally, painting's not my super favorite part, but thankfully Owen was there to help me out. But yeah, now you're gonna see us paint for forever because you have to get in all those nooks and crannies, and it took about, I would say, 2 layers of paint to make sure you didn't see any of the wood underneath. Obviously you saw kind of the grain of the wood, but I didn't really want to see kind of that like reddish color from the wood anymore. So we flipped it over, got everything from a different angle, which was super helpful. I recommend. So yeah, here we go. Just painting away. At this point, we're doing our second coat. So we're doing that, and then we're doing the front of the drawer. So we can make sure that's black too, because we almost forgot about it as we're waiting for the other paint to dry. Then we flip it over, we do the corners of the top so we can have that all set. And we do 2 layers on that as well, just to make sure you don't really see through anything. You'll see me doing the second layer in this clip. And he's doing the second layer on the drawer front, so we don't see through that either. I bought this paint from Walmart. Not like high quality or high price at all, but it actually works really well, so don't sleep on Walmart all the time. So we get to a point, this is my favorite part, we peeled off the tape, best part ever, always peeling off tape, and this is a staining the top. I used this espresso color, and it was beautiful. I loved it. I think it really gave the whole thing a new touch and kind of like its own style to it, because that part of the thing in general. And then I had these little gold knobs. They kind of look like buttons now that I'm looking at it, but I like it. This is the final product. I think it turned out really well. We did this project pretty much in one day. It probably took about 8 hours, but I think it's awesome. It turned out exactly how I pictured it. I hope y'all enjoy and have an absolutely wonderful day. Thank you guys so much for watching, and enjoy the final product photos.
Hi, this is David Heggie, supposed to be your lighting designer for the 2020 clock season. I'm here today on my first ever appearance on Backstage. This week, for my final project, I decided to show you guys what one of my concepts for lighting would be for one of the shows that were supposed to happen this summer. The show I decided to pick was The Scarlet Pimpernel, and I decided to do the song The Riddle. The design process for me is something that takes a lot of time. I like to go through and originally read the script and, listen to the music if it's a musical, and kind of get a sense of what is my message I'm trying to tell. In this case, I decided to shortened the process just because of it's not really something that I had to do for the whole show. I was trying to highlight a single aspect. So I looked at the surrounding scenes, I looked at the scene as a whole, and I came up with my design concept. The whole concept I had was very evil and mischievous, and I really wanted everything to be unknown. I wanted the audience to feel like the fourth character in that setting. There are moments in the song, in the lyrics, that it's like, are you telling the truth? And I want the audience to feel like another one of those characters, like, is he telling the truth? Is she saying that? I want them to be a part of it. And I think the lighting really does that. And it really edges you on and really makes you think, who's the evil character? When marking up the script, I really just took the main pages from the show, of the song. And what you're able to see is how the breakdown happens. You're able to see at each moment the lighting cues are made and what their target is. For example, we have things of adding new characters, adding more front light, changing the color. If the song is getting a little bit more evil and red, we're gonna go more red. If they're lightening up, we'll push back on the red and pump out a new color, and so that eventually that the audience is able to understand and associate the colors to different feelings and help derive those emotions within the audience member. But when marking up, you want to highlight certain moments. If there's a major solo, if you want to get something on a downbeat, you want to emphasize that in your pre-draft before going into queuing. Regarding the queuing, what I had to do, it's in ETC Nomad, it's a software. I had to build a theater, had to do the set, had to choreograph the people, the movement, and then you got to put the lighting in there. And then you got to start adding more to it. So as you see from the beginning, we go from something a very basic way into something more elaborate by the time we hit the end. And by each cue, we're unraveling new things. Each time we're pulling new things out of our toolbox and showing the audience, hey, this is what's happening. Overall, I think the design really helped elevate this Act 1 finale, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. Enjoy.
See the moon slink down in the sky, darling. Let your fantasies fly, darling. Life is cold and the game is old.
Just see how virtue repays you. You turn and someone betrays you. Betray him first and the game's reversed.
For we all are caught in the middle of one long treacherous riddle. Can I trust you? Should you trust me too? We shamble on through this hell,
taking on more secrets to sell,
till there comes a day when we sell our souls away.
Through the mist your lover is beckoning. Comes that moment of reckoning. Faces change, even smiles grow strange, and we all have
so many faces. The real self often erases, enticing lies flicker through our eyes. Feel the terror, forever nearer. The more you stare in the mirror, but hold your own. Face the wind alone. Reel on love, toughen your scars year by year. We're falling like stars till there comes the day when we sell our souls away.
Can I run to you? Are you true to me? I'll do unto you as you do to me.
and we slowly learn someone has to burn better
to Jesus.
But finally, treason will seize us.
And only fools follow golden rules.
We all are caught in the middle of one long, treacherous riddle of who'll trust who. Maybe I'll trust you, but can you trust me? Wait and see.
Hi, my name is Thomas J. Charles, and for my final project for the design and production department, I decided to sketch, design, and build a couple costumes from Anton Chekhov's The Three Sisters. So I chose Chekhov because my process is rooted very heavily in Stanislavski, and Stanislavski and Chekhov worked very, very closely together in early 20th century Russian theater. So I thought, what a perfect pairing to put their two works together. And I chose The Three Sisters because it's a play that I really fell in love with. I really like the message of it. To me, the play talks a lot about recognizing the beauty of the past and being excited for the dreams of the future while remaining grounded and in the present. And I think that theme really speaks to me because of what's going on right now. We're remembering time pre-COVID-19 and we're looking forward to what's to come once we have our vaccine, but we're living in it. And it's all about figuring out how to live and not only survive but also thrive during this really difficult time. So for my design inspiration, I wanted to choose something that was beautiful in the past, in the present, and in the future. And I actually settled on flowers. There's a line in the play that made me think of that. And I really liked the idea of, we treasure flowers. We put them in our houses. We wear them on our clothing for our special events. We look forward to spring coming and seeing the flowers begin to bud and watch them blossom. But we also press flowers and let them dry and decorate our homes with them. So I thought there was something really, really interesting about using flowers to represent the past, the present, and the future, and the beauty that each of those periods hold. So I designed the costume for the sister Masha, and that's the one that I actually built. And the flower that I chose to represent Masha is called the Psychotria alata, also known as the hooker's lips. I wanted something that was bold, that was sultry, and that was beautiful but dangerous, because to me, that's who she is. She's very short, she's very direct. Not the type that you would want to piss off, but she still has a lovely heart and she's still a lovely woman. So in abstracting this flower, I decided to take the shape of the collar and allow it to be inspired by the shape of the flower and the shape of the human lips. So that's what that big collar was. And then I decided to echo the rounding of the bottom of the collar in the jacket. I knew that I wanted it to be a tailored suit, because to me, that's a very powerful silhouette for a woman. And I think Masha is a very powerful person. I think she commands a lot of presence when she enters the room. And I originally wanted it to be a red or a scarlet or an orange that's, more red than it was yellow. But in shopping for fabric, that wasn't available. So I ended up going with this really cool houndstooth fabric and this quilted collar. I think this design really speaks to my aesthetic and who I am as a designer, because when you look at it, it's timeless, it's classy, it's elegant, but it's also visually interesting. And it's exciting, it's engaging, it's the kind of thing that you look at, and I know when we were doing the photo shoot, we got a lot of looks. So it's the kind of thing that people are interested to see. And I think it represents the present as opposed to the past or the future, because this is a silhouette that we know and we wear in everyday life. Women wear suits. But there's something interesting, there's something tweaked, there's something engaging about it. There's something showing that, there's something different about this present that we're living in, this present that we know. Something's not quite right. And, I think what's so great about the collar is that it can be very love or hate. And I think that ties into how people see the present, especially right now. People are either finding ways to continue their lives and continue their crafts and their careers, or they're letting the world get the better of them and really bog them down. I did also design a dress for the character of Irina. In the very beginning of the play, she is celebrating her name day, which in the Russian Orthodox tradition is the feast day of the saint that shares your name. So she was celebrating the feast day of Saint Irina, and she wears this dress. In the same way that one might choose a quinceañera dress or a bridesmaid dress, it's a dress that's very specifically chosen for this event. And in choosing this, I decided that Irina represented the future. She was excited by the idea of returning to Moscow. That's what she wanted. Everything was, this is how it is now, but I'm going to go to Moscow, and this is how it's going to be in Moscow. So I decided that I wanted to look at flowers that were beautiful when they were buds, when they were young. She also never lost that spirit. She always had in the back of her mind this idea that she was going to get to Moscow. So I wanted to find a flower that was really easy. It was not easy to kill. The kind of flower that a beginner could cultivate and make it look beautiful. So I chose a daffodil, and that's where I got the idea of this really avant-garde sort of poncho bulb thing that was on the top. Again, because Irina represented the future, I was inspired not only by the daffodil, but also by like the 1960s sort of Jetsons idea of what space looked like. And I was okay with it looking a little funky because I wanted it to be super avant-garde and push the boundaries. But that also represents the sort of the bottom of the daffodil. So if you turn the dress upside down, and the final dress would actually be the two renderings put together. If you turn the whole dress upside down, it would look like a daffodil with the bulb, and then with those little peplums sort of playing with where her waistline actually was. I was really happy with how everything turned out. I think, this play means a lot to me because of when I started to read it when I was in London pre-COVID. And I think because of that, I can use this play to look back on, what life was like before everything changed, what life is like right now, and how we as artists have to adapt. But, I'm about to graduate. I'm, always thinking 6, 8, 9, 10 months, a year ahead. So I'm looking to my future, and I think this play really wraps up everything that this experience means to me.
Hi everybody, so today I decided that I was going to build two different kinds of flats or walls that are commonly found in theatrical scenery. They're a Hollywood flat and then a standard or Broadway flat. So to start off, I'm going to walk you through the process of building a 4-foot by 8-foot Hollywood flat. For your cut list, you're going to need 2 pieces of 1x3 stick lumber at 7 feet 10.5 inches. You're going to need 2 pieces of 1x3 at 4 feet or 48 inches, 3 pieces of 1x3 at 3 feet 10.5 inches, and then for your facing, you're going to need 1 sheet of 1/4 inch luan that's 4 feet by 8 feet long. So once you have all your pieces cut for your 4-foot by 8-foot Hollywood flat, it's time to put them all together and know what goes where. So your top and bottom rails, or the pieces that are used to make up the width of your frame, those are going to be your 2 4-foot pieces. Then your 2 7-foot 10.5 inch pieces, those are going to be your stiles, which make up the length of your flat here. Then the toggles are going to be the pieces that you cut that are your 3 feet 10.5 inch pieces. Those are going to go on the inside of the stiles. You're going to start by spacing them 2 feet from the end of your top and bottom rails, and you should have, for every 2 feet down on a 4-foot by 8-foot flat or platform, you should have a toggle. The best way to attach everything is by using 1.25-inch screws, and then once everything is pieced together and properly measured out, you're going to want to take your sheet of 4 feet by 8 feet luan and screw it down to one side of your frame. Alright, so now we move on to building the Broadway or standard flat that's 4 feet by 8 feet. It's basically the same process except there's a few little differences. Your cut lists are going to be slightly different, so here we go. You're going to need 2 boards of 1 by 3 that are 7 feet 7 inches, 3 boards of 1 by 3 that are 3 feet 7 inches, 2 boards again at 4 feet. You're going to need a sheet of 4 by 8 Luan, and then you're going to need 4 pieces of 9 inch by 9 inch 1/4 inch Luan, and you're also going to need 6 pieces of 4 inch by 2 inch 1/4 inch Luan. Those are all going to be used to make up your toggles, stiles, rails, and then your corner blocks and your keystones or straps. So once you have all your pieces cut, labeled, and measured, you're going to start with one corner and apply the wood glue to the ends of the pieces, butting up the stiles to the rails. Then take your corner blocks and apply glue to them and put them on the corner where the stile and rails butt up to each other. Then you're going to staple or screw your corner block to the stile and the rail. Then you repeat the same thing for all 4 corners, and then you repeat the process with your toggles and straps. And then once all that's done and everything's glued and stapled or screwed together, then you take your sheet of 4 by 8 Luan and then you start attaching it from one corner so that it's all squared up, and then it's all nice and even on one side to make up your face for your flat. So the different kinds of tools that you'll need in order to make your 2 flats here are a pencil, ear and eye protection, so that includes goggles or glasses and earplugs. You're going to want a tape measure, a speed square, you're going to want a screw gun or a stapler, and a chop saw. So both of these flats that I made today are used to make up walls in the theater industry, but the biggest differences are as follows. A Broadway flat, generally used, as you can tell, in the Broadway circuit, they're more lightweight and they store a lot easier compared to Hollywood flats, which are mainly found in the TV industry. Hollywood flats, when you piece them together, they look more like actual walls versus Broadway flats. Also, another big difference is that Broadway flats or standard flats typically are soft covered, which means that they don't have a sheet of Luan on them to make up that wall-like appearance, versus a Hollywood flat, you're generally going to find some sort of wood on the backing of it. And with a soft covered flat like a Broadway flat, you would cover that in a product like muslin. Another big difference is that a standard flat or Broadway flat will have corner blocks and keystones, whereas a Hollywood flat does not.
Just a little technical difficulty, that's all. Steve, getting places back there. That's right. Tommy, is that you? I know my cue. Try to remember the kind of September when life was slow and oh so mellow. Try to remember the kind of September when grass was green and grain was yellow. Try to remember the kind of September when you were a tender and callow fellow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Follow, 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 follow.
that no one wept except the willow. Try to remember when life was so tender and dreams were kept beside your pillow. Try to remember when life was so tender and love was an ember about to billow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Follow, 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 follow. Follow, 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 follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, without a hurt, the heart is hollow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember the fire of September that made us mellow. Deep in December, our hearts will remember and follow.
Hi everyone, I am so excited to show you guys what I worked on these past few weeks. So initially I was going to do a full design for a musical, but then I decided I should push myself out of my comfort zone and decided to pick up a hobby that I've been really wanting to try for years now, and that's bookbinding. So for this project I was heavily inspired by the play that my university is doing this fall called She Kills Monsters, which bounces back and forth between reality and a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. And I really wanted to try and create a book that would kind of emulate something from that universe while also making it something usable for my own personal life, like a fun little notebook I could write in. So step one was tearing out the pages from one of my old sketchbooks that was about half filled from a year or two ago, and then dyeing the pages with coffee. And essentially all you do is dip the paper in coffee and saturate it, and then bake for about 10 minutes at 200 degrees until it's dry. So this whole process probably took me about 2 hours in total because I only had enough space to dry 4 sheets of paper at a time. So it was very time consuming, but I had a TV show going on in the background so I could step away for 10 minutes at a time while my paper was baking in the oven. Honestly, this part to me was the most fun, kind of getting to see all of the impurities or the imperfections that the coffee would bring to the paper, and not a single paper looked alike. It was crazy. So once they were all done and dry, I decided to press them underneath my many textbooks, so that the next morning they would be nice and flat and easy to fold and work with. So now it's time to fold. Essentially all I did was fold those sheets of papers in half. And then I sorted them into stacks of 4 full sheets of paper to make 8 sheets of paper. And in bookbinding this is called a signature. So 1 stack of paper is a signature. So my book ended up being 10 signatures, which when you do the math means it's 80 pages. And normally I would consider doing more, but because the paper is warped due to the coffee staining, it ended up looking much more full, and I was afraid that if I add too much paper, it would look too full for the small size that it is. So next, all I did was prep for sewing, What this entails is poking holes evenly spaced along the spine of each signature so that it easily allows the needle to poke through without causing any issues. Normally, bookbinders would use an awl for this, which is basically just a spike with a handle on it that allows you to have leverage, but I just used a compass without a pencil attached to it. It worked just as well. So this is what it looks like all stitched together. I was really happy with how it turned out. I used a nice lime green embroidery thread, and I bound it all together with what's called a kettle stitch, which allows it to lay relatively flat when you open it without it having closed on you. Next, it was time for the cover. I used the back of my sketchbook that I had torn the pages out as support for my covers, and I glued them on by weaving some cording into the stitching on the spine that I had done, and then fraying and attaching the cording to the cardboard. I used the same glue that I used later for the actual cover itself, and it stayed pretty well. I pressed it overnight just like I had with many other steps, and this is what it ended up looking like. It was really exciting to see everything start to come together. So now it's time for the green cover. I was really excited. I found this really cool mossy green book cloth. My original intention was to use leather, but I felt like I should start out with something more simple for my first book. And I ended up really liking it. The process of attaching it was really easy. I just used the same glue that I used before, and I just pressed down the corners, trimmed everything down that stuck out on the outside, and I attached a little flap so that it would be able to open and close. And now it's time for the gold leaf. Now this is the one step that I wish that I had done more research on, because I had many personal errors with this. I had used the wrong type of glue, and gold leaf in and of itself is very finicky to work with. So if I were to change anything in the future, I would definitely go back and redo this gold leaf. But I don't mind it in the end product. And yeah, here's the final product. I was super happy with how this turned out for my first time bookbinding. I was really excited to see what this would turn out to look like, and I ended up loving it, and I can't wait to use this book for my own little doodles or to make my own field guide or something. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed.
Backstage was part of our larger series this summer, Digital Clock. Digital Clock was made possible by a generous gift from Phil and Liz Gross. If you would like to learn more about the College Light Opera Company or our mission, or if you'd like to support us, please visit us at collegelightoperacompany.com. We hope to welcome you all back to the Highfield Theater next summer. Until then, stay safe and stay in touch.